I never imagined my own daughter would do that. She knew how much that secret meant to our family. To find out she just gave it away, it broke my heart.
The first thing my daughter's future mother-in-law said to me was, "Claire told us what you did for your sister all those years ago." I have to admit, I don't know if I could ever forgive a mother who made a choice like that. I stopped with my hand still wrapped around my water glass. Across the dinner table, my daughter Claire wouldn't look at me. Her fiancé, Ryan, suddenly became very interested in his plate. And in that one quiet moment, I understood something that made my stomach turn. Claire had told them. She had told strangers about the most painful chapter of my life. A story I had kept inside our family for 23 years. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that she had changed one detail. One single detail. And that detail turned me from the woman who had spent years protecting her younger sister into the woman everyone at that table believed had ruined her life. My name is Rebecca Lawson. I'm 56 years old. And until that dinner, I thought the hardest thing I had ever done was protect my family from an old secret. I was wrong. The hardest thing was discovering that my own daughter had used that secret to create a version of me she could be ashamed of. Claire had been talking about Ryan's parents for almost 6 months. "They're going to love you, Mom." She said it so often that I started laughing every time. Claire was 28, independent, organized, and usually very private about relationships. So when she told me Ryan had proposed, I knew this one was serious. Ryan seemed like a good man. He was 31, worked in commercial real estate, and had the kind of steady personality that balanced Claire's intensity. I had met him several times. He was polite, respectful, easy to talk to, but I had never met his parents. That dinner was supposed to change that. Claire wanted both families to know one another before they started making plans for the wedding. She chose a quiet restaurant about 20 minutes outside Columbus, Ohio. I remember standing in front of my bedroom mirror that evening, wondering whether my navy dress looked too formal. I changed earrings twice. I even called Claire. "Are you sure this place isn't casual?" She laughed. "Mom, relax. You're not being interviewed." That sentence came back to me later, because by the end of the night, that was exactly how I felt. Like I had walked into a room where everyone already had a file on me. I just didn't know it yet. Ryan's parents were named Thomas and Diane Whitmore. They were warm when I arrived. Diane hugged me immediately. Thomas shook my hand and said, "We've heard so much about you." That should have felt flattering. Instead, something about the way he said it made me pause. But I dismissed it. Of course Claire had talked about me. She was my daughter. We sat down. The conversation started normally. Work. Travel. How Claire and Ryan met. Stories from their childhood. Diane told me Ryan used to organize his toys by size when he was 5. I told her Claire once created a handwritten schedule for her stuffed animals because she believed they needed equal attention. Everyone laughed. For the first 20 minutes, I relaxed. Then Diane asked whether I still spoke to my younger sister, Melissa. My smile faded slightly. "Ido. We're actually very close." Diane looked surprised. "Oh, just that." "Oh." I glanced at Claire. She was staring at her water. Something inside me tightened. I asked, "Did Claire tell you about Melissa?" Diane hesitated. Then Claire finally looked up. "Mom." And I knew. Before anyone explained anything, I knew the conversation had already happened without me. Melissa is 6 years younger than I am. When we were young, I was less like her sister and more like a second parent. Our father left when Melissa was 9. Our mother worked constantly to keep the bills paid. So I helped. I drove Melissa to school. I made dinner. I helped with homework. When I left for college, she cried for 2 days. Years later, when Melissa was 21, she became pregnant. She was scared. The relationship she was in had already fallen apart. She had almost no savings. She wasn't emotionally ready to raise a child. And she didn't know what to do. The baby was a girl. Her name was Lily. Melissa loved her immediately. That was never the problem. The problem was that Melissa had nowhere stable to live and no realistic way to care for an infant by herself. At the time, I was 33. My husband David and I had been married for 7 years. Claire was 5. We had a small house, Steady jobs. Nothing fancy. But we were stable. Melissa came to us crying one afternoon and asked if Lily could stay with us temporarily. Not forever. Just until Melissa could rebuild her life. David and I agreed. For 11 months, Lily lived with us. Claire grew up thinking of her as a little sister. I fed her, rocked her to sleep, took her to appointments, stayed awake when she was sick. And every weekend, Melissa came to see her. She never abandoned Lily. Not once. That detail matters. Because 23 years later, that was the detail Claire changed. Back at the restaurant, Diane looked embarrassed. I'm sorry. Maybe I misunderstood. I kept my voice calm. Misunderstood what? Claire whispered. Mom, please. I looked directly at her. What did you tell them? Ryan touched Claire's arm. She pulled away from him. That movement told me he knew too. Thomas cleared his throat. Rebecca, we don't want to get involved in private family matters. Then someone should not have brought my private family matters into this room. Silence. Finally, Diane said carefully, Claire told us that your sister had a baby when she was very young. That's true. And that you took the child. I felt my chest tighten. Took. Diane immediately corrected herself. She said you believed Melissa wasn't capable of being a mother. That you convinced the family the baby would be better off with you. For a moment, I genuinely couldn't speak. Then she added the sentence that changed everything. She said Melissa spent years trying to get her daughter back. The room went completely still. Because none of that was true. Not even close. After 11 months, Melissa found a stable job. She rented a small apartment. She had built some savings. And one Saturday morning, she came to our house and said she was ready. Ready to bring Lily home. I cried. Not because I wanted to keep Lily from her mother. Because I loved that little girl. Claire cried too. She was 6 by then. She didn't understand why the baby who had slept down the hall was leaving. But Lily belonged with Melissa. That had always been the plan. We packed her clothes. Her toys. Her bottles. I drove Melissa and Lily to their new apartment myself. Over the next several years, I remained close. I babysat. I helped when Melissa worked late. Lily spent weekends with Claire. They grew up like cousins who felt more like sisters. There was never a custody fight. There was never a battle. There was never a moment when Melissa tried to get her daughter back. Because nobody had taken Lily from her. Yet that was the story my daughter had told Ryan's entire family. And I had no idea why. I turned toward Claire. Why would you say that? Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't say it exactly like that. Ryan looked uncomfortable. Diane said nothing. I leaned forward. Did you tell them I kept Lily away from Melissa? Claire's silence answered me. Claire. She finally whispered. I told them what I remembered. You were 5 years old. I remember Aunt Melissa crying. Of course she cried. Her daughter was living somewhere else while she was trying to rebuild her life. I remember you making decisions. I was the adult responsible for a baby living in my house. Claire shook her head. That's not how it felt. There it was. Not what happened. How it felt. And suddenly I realized Claire had built an entire moral judgment around memories she had formed as a child. But I still couldn't understand why she had shared it. Then Thomas said something that gave me the answer. Claire told us because she was worried you might become overly involved when she and Ryan have children. My heart dropped. Now I understood. This wasn't an accidental story. Claire had used my past as a warning. About me. I looked at my daughter and barely recognized her. You told them I might try to take over your future children? Claire wiped her face. That's not what I said. What did you say? She looked at Ryan. He didn't rescue her. Finally, she answered. I said you have trouble respecting boundaries when you think you know what's best. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes betrayal is so unexpected that your body doesn't know how else to react. I asked. And Lily was your example? Yes. Even though Melissa asked me to help her? Claire looked away. You always say that. Because it's true. That was when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. Claire had questioned the truth for years. She simply never told me. Instead, she told people I had never met. I left the restaurant early. Claire tried to follow me outside. I told her I needed space. For 2 days I didn't answer her calls. Then Melissa called me. Claire came to see me. My stomach tightened. What did she say? Melissa was quiet. She asked whether you forced me to let Lily live with you. I closed my eyes. And what did you tell her? The truth. I sat down at my kitchen table. Melissa continued. But then she said something I wasn't expecting. Rebecca, I think I know where this started. Apparently, when Claire was around 13, she had overheard an argument between me and Melissa. I remembered it immediately. Lily was 8 at the time. Melissa had lost her job and was going through a difficult period. I offered to let Lily stay with us for a few weeks. Melissa became defensive. She accused me of thinking she couldn't handle her own life. I told her I was only trying to help. We raised our voices. Claire had heard one sentence. If you need me to keep Lily again, I will. To an adult, that sentence meant support. To a frightened 13-year-old listening from the hallway, it apparently meant something very different. When Claire finally came to my house, she looked exhausted. I let her inside. She sat across from me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then I asked her one question. When did you first decide I stole Lily from Melissa? Claire flinched. I never used the word stole. You didn't need to. She took a long breath. I always felt like you were controlling when I was growing up. That hurt. But I listened. Claire told me I had always been organized. Protective. Sometimes overprotective. She said when she went to college, I called too often. When she moved apartments, I offered advice she hadn't requested. When she started dating Ryan, I asked more questions than she wanted to answer. Some of that was fair. I admitted it. I probably did overstep sometimes. Claire nodded. But you used Lily's story to prove I was capable of something I never did. She looked down. I was scared. Of what? That when Ryan and I got married, you'd expect to be part of every decision. And if we have kids someday, I thought you'd try to run everything. Then I asked the question that mattered. Why didn't you tell me that? She started crying. And her answer broke my heart in a completely different way. Because I thought you wouldn't listen. That night, after Claire left, I sat alone in my living room. For the first time, I didn't focus on what she had done wrong. I thought about what she had said about me. Had I been controlling? Maybe. After David died when Claire was 17, I became even more protective. I had lost my husband unexpectedly. Claire was all I had left in the house. I worried constantly. Was she safe? Was she eating? Was she making good decisions? I told myself I was being a mother. But maybe sometimes I was treating my fear like permission to interfere. That realization hurt. Still, it didn't excuse what Claire had done. There is a difference between telling someone, my mother can be overprotective, and telling them, my mother once took my aunt's child because she thought she knew better. One is an opinion. The other is rewriting someone's life. 3 days later, Melissa asked Claire to meet us both. Claire agreed. We met at Melissa's house. Lily was there too. She was 23 now. Smart. Confident. Working as a pediatric physical therapist. She had known the basic story of her first year for a long time. But she had never known Claire believed something darker had happened. Melissa sat beside her daughter. Then she looked at Claire. You need to hear this from me. Claire nodded. Melissa said, your mother saved me from making decisions out of panic. Claire's face tightened. Melissa continued. I asked Rebecca to take Lily temporarily. No one pressured me. No one threatened me. No one tried to keep my daughter. Then Lily spoke. And Mom has told me that story my entire life. Claire looked at me. I didn't say anything. Melissa reached across the table. You can be angry at your mother for being overprotective. You can tell her when she crosses a line. But you don't get to rewrite my history to make your argument stronger. Claire started crying again. This time, no one rushed to comfort her. Because some moments need to be felt completely. For days, I kept thinking about what hurt the most. It wasn't that Claire had shared something private. Although that hurt. It wasn't even that Ryan's parents had judged me. People form opinions from whatever information they're given. What hurt most was realizing Claire had needed me to be worse than I was. Because if I was simply an anxious mother who sometimes crossed boundaries, then we could talk about it. We could fix it. But if I was a woman who had once taken another mother's child and refused to give her back, then Claire didn't have to feel guilty for keeping me at a distance. She had turned me into a villain so her fear would feel justified. And that broke something between us. About a week later, Ryan showed up at my house. Without Claire. I almost didn't let him inside. But he looked genuinely uncomfortable. He apologized. Not for what Claire had said. For believing it without ever questioning whether there might be another side. I told him, "You didn't know me." He nodded. "That's true. But I'm planning to marry your daughter. I should have realized family stories are complicated." Then he told me something Claire hadn't. The story had come up because she and Ryan had been arguing about where they might live after marriage. Ryan wanted to remain close to both families. Claire wanted to move farther away. When Ryan asked why, Claire said she was afraid I would become too involved. That was when she told the Lily story. Suddenly the entire situation made even more sense. Claire hadn't shared the story casually. She had used it to support a decision she already wanted to make. That made the betrayal feel deliberate. When Claire came over again, I did something she wasn't expecting. I didn't argue. I didn't explain Lily. I didn't defend my past. I told her, "You're allowed to want distance." She stared at me. "You're allowed to move somewhere else." Her eyes filled. "You're allowed to tell me I'm calling too much." I continued. "You're even allowed to tell Ryan and his family that I've made mistakes as your mother." Then I looked directly at her. "But you are not allowed to change facts because the truth isn't dramatic enough to justify what you want." She covered her face. I let the silence sit between us. Then I said, "If you want boundaries with me, use your own voice. Don't borrow Melissa's pain. Don't rewrite Lily's childhood. And don't destroy my character to avoid having an uncomfortable conversation." For the first time since that dinner, Claire didn't defend herself. She simply said, "You're right." Claire asked Ryan's parents to meet with us again. I didn't want to go. But Melissa convinced me. You deserve to hear her correct it. So we returned to the same restaurant. Same quiet atmosphere. Almost the same table. Claire looked terrified. But this time, I didn't help her. She had created the story. She needed to correct it. She told Thomas and Diane everything. That Melissa had asked for help. That Lily had stayed with me for less than a year. That Melissa had remained involved. That there had never been a fight over custody. Then Claire said, "I used a distorted version of that story because I was afraid of confronting my mom about my own boundaries." Diane looked at me. "I owe you an apology." I thanked her. But surprisingly, that wasn't the moment that mattered most. The moment that mattered was when Claire said, "My mother has made mistakes. But this wasn't one of them." For some reason, those words almost made me cry. Because she wasn't calling me perfect. She was finally calling me human. Claire and Ryan eventually decided to move about an hour away. Months earlier, that decision would have devastated me. Now, I supported it. Claire needed her own home, her own marriage, her own life. And I needed to learn that closeness isn't measured by how often someone is physically near you. I stopped calling every day. I stopped giving advice unless she asked. When Claire sent me pictures of furniture she liked, I responded with, "Looks great." Instead of, "Have you checked the measurements?" It sounds small, but for us it was progress. And Claire changed too. When something bothered her, she started saying it directly. No stories. No exagerations. No silence that later became resentment. Just honesty. Sometimes uncomfortable honesty. But honesty. One afternoon, Melissa and I were sitting together when she said, "You know what's strange?" "What?" "For years, you thought keeping that chapter private was protecting everyone." She was right. We had rarely discussed Lily's first year. Not because we were ashamed. Because it belonged to Melissa. I had always believed some family experiences should stay inside the family. But secrets create empty spaces. And people fill empty spaces with assumptions. Claire had grown up with pieces of a story. A baby living with us. An aunt crying. An argument years later. No full explanation. Her imagination had connected the wrong dots. That didn't excuse what she did. But it taught me something. Privacy and secrecy are not always the same thing. Sometimes protecting a story too carefully can leave the next generation guessing at what really happened. A month before the wedding, Claire came over. She brought an old photo album. Inside was a picture of 6-year-old Claire holding baby Lily. Claire stared at it for a long time. Then she said, "I used to think you loved being needed." I smiled sadly. Maybe I did. She looked surprised. I continued. After your father died, especially, being needed made me feel useful. Less afraid. Claire's eyes filled. Then she admitted something. When she was little, she remembered being jealous of the attention Lily received. I had never known that, she said. You were always holding her, feeding her, talking about what she needed. I asked, "Did you think I was replacing you?" Claire nodded. And suddenly another piece clicked into place. The story she had created about me wasn't only based on fear. It was partly based on the feelings of a 5-year-old girl who had watched her mother care for another child and never fully understood why. That didn't erase the betrayal, but it helped me understand where the first crack had formed. On Claire's wedding day, I stood in the bridal room while she adjusted her dress. She looked at me through the mirror. "You okay?" I nodded. Then she laughed. "You've asked me 0 questions today. Are you feeling all right?" I laughed too. "I'm practicing." She turned around. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to climb into my bed during storms. Then she hugged me. Not a polite hug. A real one. And whispered, "I'm sorry I made people believe something about you that wasn't true." I told her, "I forgive you." Then I added, "But forgiveness doesn't mean it didn't matter." She nodded against my shoulder. I know. That was important. Because reconciliation isn't pretending betrayal never happened. It is deciding whether trust can be rebuilt after the truth is finally faced. Claire and I are different now. In some ways, we're less close than we were before that dinner. But in other ways, our relationship is more real. She tells me when I'm overstepping. I listen. I tell her when something hurts me. She listens. Melissa and Lily are still part of our lives. And sometimes when we all sit together, I think about how easily one altered detail almost poisoned an entire family history. That is what betrayal taught me. People don't always lie by inventing an entire story. Sometimes they take something true, change one important piece, and let everyone else reach the wrong conclusion. And when someone you love does that to you, the pain isn't only that others believe the lie. The pain is knowing the person who knew your heart best was willing to let them. But I also learned something about motherhood. Your children are allowed to grow away from you. They are allowed to see your flaws. They are allowed to set boundaries. They are even allowed to be angry with you. What they are not entitled to do is rewrite your life so they can avoid speaking honestly about their own. Claire finally learned how to tell me, "Mom, I need space." And I finally learned that hearing those words wouldn't destroy me. Sometimes the truth feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it changes relationships. But a difficult truth will always do less damage than a convenient lie. And if I could go back to that first dinner, to the moment Diane made that comment, and I realized everyone at the table already knew my secret, I wouldn't defend myself immediately. I would look at my daughter and ask one question. Why did you need them to believe that version of me? Because sometimes the biggest family secret isn't what happened years ago. It's the resentment someone has been quietly carrying ever since.